This is According to Callus. I'm dropping in as a special Christmas presentation of You Might Be A Statist. This is number 2 in the series of 4 I did, and though I said I was going to do the same intro, I did not, just to see if you were listening and paying attention. But as I tell you, if you find that these intros are unnecessary or duplicative, you can feel free to fast forward. But if you're doing so now, it is too late. We're already there. Welcome! This is another special edition of According to Callus, and we're going to do both audio and video at the same time. We're going to see how this turns out. So the podcast is actually going to be the same as the video, so we're going to be available in 2 formats, and we'll play around with this and see if this is a viable thing to do in the future. Not sure. I'm not a big fan of the whole idea of live streaming. Though I gotta admit, very rarely do I make a retake or redo a show. I leave my flubs in there. I'm human. I don't expect anybody wants me to come across as being perfect or even, God forbid, think that I'm perfect. But I think it's more authentic and it's a better show if I just roll with the flow here. So, this is going to be number 2 of the series of You May Be A Statist. Or, if you will, to follow the Jeff Foxworthy way of thinking, you might be a statist. So, number 1, I have them written down to keep track here. If you are more concerned about what your neighbor is doing than, I don't know, say the government around you, you might be a statist. If you want to prevent others from having fun, draw your own conclusions here. Just kind of go with it. People generally do things that they enjoy, even when they're self-destructive, which isn't something that we want to encourage. But if you worry about that more than what you're doing yourself, you might be a statist. If you think locking people up for hurting themselves or doing something stupid, giving them a felony, if you will, where you ruin their entire life, is a good idea, you might be a statist. If you worry about what other people are doing, this is almost a direct corollary about the concern, right? But if you're more worried about what other people are doing, hurting or not hurting, just doing anything, as opposed to focusing on your own life, you might be a statist. If you want to mandate behaviors, yes, this is touchy, isn't it? If you want to force people to do things, you might be a statist. Now, interestingly enough, that goes both directions, right? If you want to force somebody to not do something, is really no different than forcing somebody to do something. Indeed, at some point in the past, groups of people went to the government and said, we want your help, or we want your assistance in doing this, and by granting them any authority, you basically gave them control. Now, hopefully we would learn from our mistake, but history has shown time and time again, we don't, in fact, learn from our mistakes. And just for you Brian McClanahan fans out there like I am, you'll get this one. If you are a Yankee, you might be a statist. And I say that as a reformed Yankee, right? Brian McClanahan's thesis, or theory, if you will, is pretty much every activity that grows government, pretty much every bad idea that gets put into law, has its roots in Yankeedom. Take that for what it's worth. I think it's hilarious. And being a reformed Yankee, I realize that when I point the finger at somebody else, I got 3 more pointing at me. So I'm very careful about what I advocate, both for and against, because even though I might know that something's right or something's wrong, or Christianity says this, or God's directive in the Bible is this: at no point do I believe that I'm empowered or I should use the power of government to force somebody else to comply with that. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of having free will. Now, I know there's going to be people who disagree with me. And the question is, are you a statist? And yes, all of this is supposed to be at least a little tongue-in-cheek, but it's supposed to cause you to really think about the things that you advocate and what you believe, and what are the consequences of that. Is that something that you really, truly want to be involved with? Is this something that you think is a general positive? This basically dives into the whole idea of the general welfare clause. And we, of course, will revisit that more than one more time going in the future. Well, that is, again, the special edition, You Might Be A Statist, number 2. Out of sync from the rest of the podcast because this is a separate entry and it's just a little fun. And this is indeed the Tuesday, the 30th, the last day of the month of November. And I will see you on the other side.